everybody, the Planning Development Committee meeting for June 11th, 2024. I'd like to welcome Acting Director Dan Namziak to the seat today at the front for the planning. And we'll start out with attendance, which has already been taken. We expect Councillor Kyle to be here shortly, and Lucas Oakley has sent her regrets. So welcome everybody. Could we have a mover for the approval of the agenda? Okay, moved by John Bell, seconded by Councillor Coleman. Is there any additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, it's passed. Is there any declarations of pecuniary interest tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Out of an abundance of caution, 7.5 due to my business.
Okay. Okay, we have no delegations, petitions, or presentations. So we will move forward to adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Pierce, seconded by Mayor Bailey. All those in favor? Okay, pass. Business arising from the minutes. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Okay, seeing none. Move forward to the public hearings on the Planning Act to receive information from the public. RPT 030124 ZBA 524 167 third concession. And if we could have a mover for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Howes. And if we could ask our planner, Haley, to come forward. We'll now declare the public meeting open.
Good evening, members of the Planning and Development Committee. This evening, I will be presenting zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 524MH for lands located at 167 3rd Concession Road within the former geographic township of Burford. The subject lands are located south of 3rd Concession Road, north of Highway 403. The lands are currently serviced by private water, sanitary, and stormwater infrastructure. The surrounding area consists of agriculture and natural heritage land uses. The subject lands are designated and zoned agriculture within the County of Brant official plan and the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116. The applicants of 167 3rd Concession Road intend to construct a new single detached dwelling. They are requesting a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment to continue residing in the current dwelling during the construction of the new one. The existing dwelling will be demolished within 90 days after the new dwelling receives its occupancy permit. To ensure that only one dwelling remains on the property, a temporary rezoning is recommended. This will allow for 2 dwellings on the property for a maximum of 3 months from the issuance of the new dwelling's occupancy permit with an agreement registered on title. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the committee and the public with information from this application to temporarily amend the County of Brant zoning bylaw to permit 2 dwelling units at 167 3rd Concession Road for a period of 3 months to allow the applicant to reside in the existing dwelling until the new dwelling is constructed. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for our planner? Councillor Pierce and then Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, you stated that the existing house is going to be demolished after the occupancy on the first one, but it says on the thing here the home is to be relocated.
Through the chair, yes. So there will be 2 houses on the property. So there will be a new house constructed in a different location, and then the existing house will be still standing. And then after the 90 days, the occupancy permit, it'll be demolished. So there will be a new house in a different location on the property.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chair, through you, just for clarification, because what I'm looking at here in our package, it's got existing home to be relocated off-site.
Through the chair, it is my understanding as part of this application that the property and the house will be located on that property at 167 Third Concession. Both houses will be located on that property.
And it's being demolished, not moved.
Through the chair, the existing house will be demolished once the new dwelling is constructed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Miller, then Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Three to the planner. What's the bylaws now? Because I've seen many homes go up with the existing home there, and then the home comes down afterwards. And I've never seen anything before planning. So, why is this before us? What's different about this versus what a homeowner's allowed to do now?
Through the chair, the process has currently changed. So there was an original temporary bylaw or temporary house application that only went through the building department, and now currently we have changed the process, I believe in February of this year, to request that a agreement is registered on title and larger securities.
Okay, so follow-up question. So, how much would a homeowner have to pay? What does this application cost the homeowner?
Through the chair, only $20,000 of securities is collected and released once the house is completed.
All right, thank you.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I'm following up a little bit on Councillor Pierce's question, just because on what is page 12 out of 53 of our package, and probably the fourth page of your package, I believe this is, because it's handwritten on here, I think this is the applicant's proposal. It does say existing home to be relocated off-site. And as long as it's gone, we don't care, right? It's like they can demolish it, or they can put it on a truck and move it somewhere else, but as long as it's gone, that's all we care about. Is that right?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions for the plan? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move forward and ask the applicant if they would like to present. Or do you have any last comments? Okay. Ms. Bob Phillips? Okay. Would Bob Phillips or Rashika like to comment on this application?
Through the chair, sorry, we were not applicants on this application.
I don't believe they're here. So the applicant's not here then? Okay. So the applicant's not here to answer any questions. And there's no members of the public today to ask any questions. And there's no one online. Okay. So I guess we'll close this portion of the public meeting. I should ask it, I guess, 3 times. So I'm going to ask it a second time if there's any questions from the public. And I will ask a third time if there's any questions from the public online or here. Okay. Seeing nobody to ask any questions, we will close the public meeting, and we will open the floor for anybody who would like to speak further about this application. Okay. We have a mover and we have a seconder for the recommendation. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Passed. You can note that Councillor Kyle has joined the meeting. So we'll move to 7.2 RPT 030224 ZBA 624-464 Salt Springs Road, and our planner Halima, if you would like to speak to this one as well. We'll consider the public meeting open now.
I will be presenting zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 6-24MH for lands located at 464 Salt Springs Church Road within the former geographic township of Onondaga. The subject lands are located north of Salt Springs Church Road, east of McClellan Road. The subject lands are currently serviced by private water, sanitary, and stormwater infrastructure, and the surrounding area consists of agricultural and natural heritage land uses. The subject lands are designated and zoned agriculture within the County of Brant official plan and the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116. The applicants of 464 Salt Springs Church Road propose to build a new single detached dwelling and demolish the existing dwelling once the new dwelling is constructed. The applicants are requesting a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment to continue living in the current dwelling during the construction of the new one. The existing dwelling will be demolished within 90 days after the new dwelling receives its occupancy permit. To ensure only one dwelling remains on the property, a temporary rezoning is recommended, allowing for 2 dwellings on the property for a maximum of 3 months from the issuance of the new dwelling's occupancy permit, with an agreement registered on title. The purpose of the presentation is to provide the committee and the public with information from this application to temporarily amend the County of Brant zoning bylaw to permit 2 dwellings at 464 Salt Springs Church Road for a period of 3 months to allow the applicants to reside in the existing dwelling until the new dwelling is constructed. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So do we have any questions for their planner? Okay. Seeing no questions, we'll ask the applicant if they would like to make a presentation. Okay, I guess the applicant is not here. We'll open it to the floor for those who would like to speak to the application first time. Okay, we'll open the floor a second time for those who would like to speak online or offline. Okay. And we'll ask one third time if there's anybody who would like to come forward to speak to this application. Okay. Seeing no one, we will call the question. We need first and second. Yeah, okay. Do we have a mover for the motion? Moved by Councillor Coleman, second by Councillor Pierce. All those in favor? Any opposed? It is passed. Okay, moving on to 7.3, RPT 030324 ABA 824 1318 Colburn Street West. Dan Namziak, Acting Director of Planning. We'll open the public meeting now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a zoning bylaw amendment application for a property located at 1318 Colburn Street West with frontage along Bishopsgate Road. And we do have the applicant agent, both Mr. Phillips and Ms. Angrish, present to speak to any details or any questions. So we'll just be presenting this application for information purposes this evening. The property itself should look familiar to committee, as we have dealt with a number of applications, similar applications along this stretch of Bishopsgate Road. The parcel as it stands today, after some related applications have occurred, rezonings, severance applications, so the parcel is a little smaller than it was many months ago, but today we are dealing with a total area of 41 hectares, maintaining frontage both along Colbert Street and Bishopsgate. And the property currently contains an existing dwelling with agricultural structures. And as I mentioned, previous applications have occurred along the frontage where the red dots are located. The subject property contains two designations in our current official plan. The agricultural designation is the off-white portion to the rear, and the light blue portion is our employment lands designation. This is the portion of the property that would allow for industrial development to occur. Just for committee's benefit, I've also put up on the right side of the screen the mapping from our current draft approved official plan, and it shows that the intent is the same, that these lands along the frontage are continue to be to maintain a general employment designation with the agricultural maintained in the rear. The current zoning on the property outlined in red is entirely zoned agricultural, so this is the purpose of the application this evening. So the application proposes to amend the zoning on the portion of the subject lands that are located within that blue employment lands designation from agricultural to light industrial. So this is occurring on both of the remaining portions that have frontage along Bishopsgate Road. Both portions are approximately 2.6 hectare in size. And what this will allow for future severance applications to be applied for on these lands to separate the industrial from the employment lands, so that the employment lands can be developed for employment light industrial purposes. So the application also includes more of a technical amendment to recognize the remaining lands that will remain designated and zoned agricultural. So the agricultural zoning requires a minimum of 40 hectares to be maintained as an agricultural parcel. The result of future severance applications will dip that total area below the 40 hectares. So what we're doing is just thinking ahead and recognizing what that leftover area will be after the severance has occurred, so that we do not have to come back to the committee at a later date. So the application, as I mentioned, is required to facilitate the development of the subject lands, the areas within the blue area, the employment lands designation, and allow for those subsequent consent applications, and then ultimately detailed design determined through site plan control applications. So at this point, the application has been circulated to the public. It's also been circulated internally for review and for comments for information purposes only. And we look forward to bringing a recommendation to a future Planning and Development Committee, Planning Council next month. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. So we have some questions for the planner. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions through to Dan. Dan, do we have a tenant set for those two parcels?
Through Mr. Chair, I'll let the applicants and their agents speak to those details.
Second question, all three parcels, are they, this might be for Mr. Walton, but are all three part of the proposed new municipal drain?
Through Mr. Chair, great question. So development along this Bishopsgate corridor has been complex because there has been no legal outlet established originally. We have been working very closely with Mr. Walton's group, who took the reins on establishing a new municipal drain for this area to allow for those all of these lots to be considered for drainage, stormwater purposes, to allow them to be developed a little bit more efficiently and, more importantly, holistically. So these two parcels have been considered in that municipal drain project.
Okay, and final question, does it matter what business would settle in there and how much of their property they say hard surface, would that affect their municipal drain contribution, or is it just, do we know at this point? I'm just wondering if that would impact it at all.
Through Mr. Chair, I'm lucky to have Mr. Walton here in person, who's rushing up here to answer that question.
Through the chair, so I think there's about 8 development properties along this section here, and there's a couple that are already developed. They're all required to do stormwater management to a certain level, but they can't do that to a level that would control like the regional storm zoning. So we do need to get a legal outlet. So as development engineering services here, reviews each site plan. They're requiring them to do a stormwater management report, which sort of brings them back to the level of what they were as farmland, and then they're all treated the same as a municipal drain. We're anticipating that drain actually to come before council in July. We're hoping, so it's near completion and should be coming forward. We're really hoping, we're working very hard on finding a way for these properties to develop in parallel to that drain going through the process of being constructed, because some of them are really a long ways along, needing to get going to work towards building permits, and think that we're finding a way for that to happen.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I appreciate it.
Councillor Chambers.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, and this may be a question that can be put off until the applicant speaks, but I wanted to ask the planner. This is a little bit different than the previous applications on this strip of land, in that when the zoning was changed, for example, on the Roswell Concrete property, it was done in context with an application by Roswell Concrete, and we knew what was going there. And similarly with the Triggers and Bows and the other properties that have been zoned already. And when the application for zoning came forward, we had the opportunity to see what was going on the property. This is a little bit different in that we are zoning it without knowing the tenant, and we are essentially okaying a whole variety of uses with the M2 zoning. And I'm concerned that the uses that are listed may not be compatible with the residences in the residential area to the northwest, and the lands directly across that are undeveloped are, I believe they are designated for residential as well. So why is this being done this way as opposed to waiting for the applicant to have a tenant and we know what use is going on, so we have a little bit of control, albeit small, with regard to these two remaining properties?
Through you, Mr. Chair, fair question. In the other cases, you can see the M3, 24, M2, 34, M2, 35. Those are site-specific zonings that didn't necessarily restrict uses, but permitted some site-specific provisions related to additional coverage or outdoor storage or anything. All of the uses permitted in their M2 zone would still be permitted. So if that tenant or that property owner chose to pull out of their specific project but still own that property, they could technically flip it over to anyone who wanted to permit a use within the M2 zone. So the important piece is that the designation there for employment development has been there for some time, and this application is just implementing that long-term vision. Part of the reason of showing kind of that draft approved official plan mapping is showing that that vision remains in place for that corridor. Through the public circulations of previous applications, we have heard from the residents. We do recognize that there are residential uses and future residential uses proposed in the, or at least land uses in place for future residential. So we are considering them through these applications, through land use compatibility analysis, making sure that the buildings are pushed back and not towards the front, allowing for lots of landscaping to buffer noise and lights from trucks and things. So we do have the ability to control some of that detailed design and consider the residential uses or any other sensitive land uses through site plan control applications. So this application is just one step in the process to establish the land use.
And just to find out, so when the tenant comes along or the prospective purchaser of the lot, there will be, it is still subject to site plan control.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Dan, for your presentation. I'm going to call upon the applicant, Bob Phillips, to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First of all, this application was initiated on the southern portion or the southern piece of land by a industry that wants to relocate to Brant County. It is a steel fabricating facility called Shadeview. They fabricate park structures and are very active throughout the southwestern and even northern Ontario in producing shade structures for parks. Through the process here, it was identified by the planning staff, Dan, that there is one piece left on the Spearenberg farm to the north that really needed to be addressed, both from a zoning perspective and an amendment to the agricultural component, being an undersized agricultural farm. So through those discussions, that piece was included to be an M2 zone. Yes, totally subject to site plan approval, and therefore, I'm going to say on the north parcel, the county gets an opportunity to deal with the compatibility with the neighbors. We did do planning justification studies for the southern portion of the lot, southern piece of land, and as such, I think it's fully documented about what type of activity is going to happen on that lot. But I think it's good planning to deal with this at this time with all the others that have happened along the road. Short of that, I'm just here to answer any questions you might have about our application and the other portion associated with that northern piece.
Do we have any questions for the planner? Okay. Seeing no questions, I will open it to the floor for the public to ask any questions. First time. And I will open to the floor a second time and those online. Seeing none, I will ask a third time if there's anybody who would like to speak to this on the floor or online. Okay. Seeing none, is there any further questions from council for either the planner for the county or the agent? Okay. We do have a recommendation before us. We have a mover. Moved by Councillor Coleman, second by Councillor Kyle. Call the vote. All those in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Seeing none, it is passed. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, 7.4, RPT 0320-24 ABA 924 138 Langford Church Road, and we will open the meeting and ask this for a mover of the recommendation. Moved by Mayor Bailey, second by Councillor Pierce. Okay, we will ask our planner to come forward and speak.
Thank you. I will be presenting zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 9-24-HH for 138 Langford Church Road from JH Cahoon Engineering, care of Bob Phillips, on behalf of Brian and Wendy Piggott, located in the geographic township of Brantford. The subject lands, located on the north side of Langford Church Road, are surrounded by agricultural, rural residential, and natural heritage land uses. The property has a lot area of approximately 23 hectares and a frontage of approximately 267 meters along Langford Church Road. The subject lands are designated agriculture within the County of Brant official plan, and the subject lands are currently zoned agriculture and natural heritage within the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116. The applicant is proposing to amend the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116 to recognize an undersized agricultural parcel of approximately 23 hectares as a condition of severance for the application B48-22-SL, which was approved by the Committee of Adjustment in April of 2024. To date, no comments have been received as part of the public circulation. It is noted that this presentation is for informational purposes only, and staff recommendation report will be brought before council. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for the planner? Councillor Miller.
I'm just wondering if this, through Mr. Chair, will be going to the Ag Advisory this month. They meet June 24th before we see a recommendation from planning staff.
Through the chair, yes, this can be assigned to the Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions for the planner? Okay. Thanks very much for your presentation. We'll ask the planner for the agent for the applicant to come forward, speak, or online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Sorry, I'm not a planner, but this is a residual application from a previous rezoning application approved by council, where the undersized agricultural piece was not recognized, and therefore this is more a technical amendment that is being presented. We thank staff for assisting us through this process, and I'm here to answer any questions. I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Do we have any questions for the agent? Okay, seeing no questions, thank you very much, Bob. We'll open the floor for anyone to speak from the public the first time. And we will ask a second time if there's anybody from the floor or from online to speak to this. And we will ask a third time if there's anybody who would like to speak on the floor or online. Seeing nobody, we will close this portion of the public meeting. Is there any further questions for the planner or agent in regards to this? Seeing none, we do have a mover and a seconder for this application. Call the question. All those in favor? Okay. Any opposed? It's passed.
Thank you.
Application RPT 03-2324 ZBA 724 19 King Street South, and our planner Halima, if you would like to present.
I'll be presenting zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 7-24-HH for 19 King Street South from JH Cahoon Engineering, care of Bob Phillips, on behalf of Taylor and Lisa Whiting in the former geographic township of Oakland. The subject lands approximately 1.17 hectares in total lot area with a frontage of approximately 94 meters on King Street South are located within the village of Oakland, west of King Street South, east of Tyson Way, and south of Mackenzie Lane. The property is serviced by private well and septic system. Currently on the lands contain a legally established agricultural related commercial use from 1998 serving Brant County and surrounding areas. A barn for personal storage, a business office, and an equipment storage is located at the rear of the property, which also includes an existing single detached dwelling. The surrounding area features low-density residential uses to the north, south, and west, with the Malcolm Mills residential subdivision to the west and agricultural uses generally to the east. The subject lands are designated suburban residential within the County of Brant official plan. The subject lands are currently zoned agriculture and suburban residential within the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116. The application proposes to rezone the subject lands known as 19 King Street South from agricultural zone to special exception agricultural zone to recognize a reduced lot area of 1.15 hectares and a reduced lot frontage of 79 meters compared to the required 40 hectares and 150 meters frontage respectively to assist in a future Planning Act application. Additionally, the proposal seeks to rezone adjacent lands that are currently landlocked from the agricultural zone to special exception suburban residential zone to permit a reduced lot frontage of 15 meters instead of the required 30 meters, and to rezone a portion of the adjacent lands from suburban residential to natural heritage zone. If approval is received, a subsequent consent application will proceed. To date, comments have been received as part of the public circulation. In response, information on potential development and permitted uses within the suburban residential zone has been provided to the public. It was clarified that no more than one dwelling is permitted within the suburban residential zone, and the zone change application aims to permit access to the existing landlocked parcel. It is noted that the presentation is for informational purposes only, and staff will bring forward a report for recommendation to council. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for the planner? Councillor Miller.
Well, maybe I'm the only one that doesn't understand what the planner just said, but I wonder if we could, if I'm looking at the three parcels, the one looks, the most landlocked one goes to natural heritage, is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, the one that's most northerly is the one that's changing to natural heritage.
Okay, and then the one that's going to SRXX.
Through the chair, that would be the middle parcel between the northerly parcel and the southern parcel. It is changing to SRXX to allow for the reduced frontage as per the consent application that will occur.
So that's, well, it's a weird parcel, but I guess that's just the way life goes. So is that going to be a residential lot down the road, like suburban residential?
Through the chair, it's already currently zoned suburban residential. We're just recognizing the undersized lot frontage, but yes, it will be used for residential purposes.
Okay, and then the last piece will be rezoned to AXX, you say, which is agriculture?
Through the chair, it's existing agriculture with the existing agricultural business, and it's just recognizing the undersized agricultural parcel.
So if I can ask then, Mr. Chair, what's the existing ag business there now?
Through the chair, I will leave that to the applicants or the agents to explain.
Okay, but the fact that we're going to rezone that means that any business there for future, if they sell it, has to be agricultural related.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay,
it has to.
Then I'll ask the applicant. Okay, thank you.
Is there any further questions for the planner? Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to now call on the agent of the applicant for his presentation.
Thanks again, Chairman, members of the committee. Bob Phillips from Kahuna Engineering. This is an application that deals with two remnant blocks from the Malcolm Mills Estate subdivision that were initially, I think, it goes back quite a while, were intended to be merged with the lots along King Street. Those owners have no interest in the parcel, so the owner would like to merge them basically together to create one single family lot in that location. It requires a severance of a strip of land to give it some legal frontage onto King Street off of other lands he owns along King Street there. And when you put this all together, you get one single family lot. Through the discussions with the planner, there's a component of the most, I'm going to say, northerly lot that is natural heritage, and we've agreed to have that rezoned to natural heritage. Currently, there is a business operating out of the, I'm going to call it the retained parcel, and that will continue to operate. It's just on a deficiently sized lot. Few moving parts here, but I'll turn it over to Rashika to maybe expand on that.
Hey, good evening, Chair Rashika Angrish from Angrish Group. Just touching on what Bob Phillips has mentioned. So, two landlocked blocks already existing as remnant parcels from Malcolm Mills subdivision. owned by the same owner where they currently reside and operate a contracting, agricultural related contracting business. And their son wants to build a home while, helping out with the business. And this location, these are existing blocks owned by them. As Bob had mentioned, they need frontage to obtain a building permit, and the lot line adjustment will give these blocks some frontage. And I think we have covered between both of us. Don't want to repeat anything, but again, happy to answer any more questions you may have.
Do we have any questions for the agents of the applicant? Mayor Bailey.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think I understood what you said. So the people that run the business on lot 19 or number 19, they're going to build a house for themselves using that funny little driveway and build a house for themselves so that someday they can sell the farm, so to speak, and they'll have a house at the far end of that property with a driveway, and that will let them sell 19 separately someday down the road.
Well, basically, the son of the principal of the business, who is involved in the business, wants to build a house basically in close proximity to the business. The owner of the business will continue to have a residence on number 19, and his son will be on the newly created lot.
Thank you.
So it's kind of a family operation.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, go open to the floor to speak to the application for the first time. I will open it to the floor now the second time and to the online if there's anybody. And I will now open it the third time to the floor and to online. Seeing no one to ask any questions, I will close this portion of the public meeting and open it again to the floor for the council if there's any further questions. Okay. We do have a recommendation. If we could have a mover for the recommendation, moved by Councillor Coleman, second by Councillor Kyle. Call the question. All those in favor? Okay. Any opposed? The recommendation is passed. Now move to public hearings under the Planning Act.
Thank you again. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. There is none under the public hearings for the Planning Act to consider for staff recommendation. We have no consent items, and no consent items received are approved. We move on to staff reports. We have one staff report, RPT 0331-24, review and reorganization of development planning meeting. And we could ask Alicia Dijak, acting manager for planning.
Thank you, Chair McAlpine. Through to committee, what you have before you right now is an updated recommendation to what was brought back for committee's consideration last month. So committee will recall in February, issues were addressed with regards to the current process for the public planning consultation. The current process, as it stands, is exactly what we're doing right now. So information reports come to the Planning and Development Committee in the public meeting format. Following that, the subsequent month recommendations are coming directly to council. During that time, as it is a council meeting, procedural bylaw restrictions surrounding the format of council apply. So issues that came forward, members of the public who wanted to speak to recommendations had to register as a delegation in accordance with the procedural bylaw. As the agenda outlines, delegations are heard at the beginning of the meeting, as opposed to, as we've heard tonight, immediately while the planning report is considered. In terms of individual members of the public and consultant consultation with the recommendation of the planners, since that happens at different parts of the meeting, there's no ability for that because the consultants attend at the delegation phase, reports are heard at the staff report phase, which is when the planners would bring forward recommendations. Committee requested that we review that process, and so a report was brought forward last month. It was brought forward by Matt Vaughn. Planning identified 4 potential options, one being the status quo, second option being a revised 2 meeting, so no introduction. The first time that committee would hear the application would be with a recommendation. So if an application was moving forward tonight, you would have heard a recommendation from the planner, and then it would go on to council. And then there were 2 other options at the that were provided. One, that there's a revised 2 meeting. However, the information meeting that we do it as we do currently would be the responsibility of the applicants with certain restrictions in place. So not all applications would have that. That policy had not been developed. The recommendation of staff was 3, revised 2 meeting with external consultation prior to a completed application. Committee had specific concerns with regards to that, specifically that they weren't comfortable with the applicants being responsible for the public meeting consultation process. There was questions surrounding whether or not council would be there, whether or not members of the public would be able to discuss and have their comments heard while committee members were there. And there was some committee discussion last month stating that what you really wanted was to be able to hear from members of the public when a decision is being made. So what I have before you tonight might potentially seem like a somewhat radical recommendation, but I would respectfully request that committee hear me through. So what I'm recommending is that when we go to Planning Council, when you're hearing recommendations, we amend the procedural bylaw to allow that council meeting to hold a public meeting. So we will, essentially how it used to be with the Planning Committee, so staff will come up, they will present their recommendation. The applicant and their consultant will have the ability to speak to that recommendation. Members of the public who are not registered, who just walk in the door, can come up and speak to that application. There'll be flexibility surrounding you guys requesting that staff address concerns that are immediately come up. And then you vote on that decision the same way that Planning Council is acting now. What that brings us to, though, is the fact that we have staffing constraints, and we're essentially doing 2 meetings back to back that are serving the same function. To me, it doesn't make sense for us to hold a Planning and Development Committee meeting to go into public meeting to hear members of the public for information purposes, adjourn that meeting, and then have a second meeting where we're going to be opening up into public meeting to hear recommendations. It's inefficient. It takes a whole lot of clerk's resources in terms of setting up 2 meetings as opposed to 1. My recommendation, if we're going to go that way, is that we just do it all in 1 meeting. So a recommendation would come forward for information. It would be in a public format. Members of the public can come up, they can talk about the application itself. There's no recommendation. The following month, it would come to the same meeting, council. So first we would hear the information, then we would hear the recommendation, similar to how it used to happen at planning for years and years. Should this recommendation be approved, there are a few other loose ends that would need to be tied up. Planning Advisory Committee reports to Planning and Development. We would need to have that report to Admin and Operations, like all the other advisory committees do. Tower applications in their current format, we haven't amended anything yet, will come straight to Planning Council, since they're, we can amend, since we're amending the recommendation anyways, we could send planning related matters as opposed to Planning Act related matters. And reports, which are currently coming here, staff reports, could go either to policy, Development Committee quarterly if it's policy planning related, or admin and operations with the rest of the organization. So thank you. I'd be happy to hear any questions.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Alicia. Alicia, first, thank you for you and everyone else who was involved in the effort put into this. This is, it sounds complicated, and I was having trouble wrapping my head around it over the weekend trying to read through it. I appreciate the fact that you used the word radical. It seems radical, although it's clear that there are some necessary efficiencies to be gained through this. I'm just wondering, and partially for the benefit of people who watch this video later, can you clarify a little bit why this is necessary, and kind of walk us through the timeline process where a couple weeks can make a big difference?
Sure. Through Chair McAlpine to Councillor House's question, in terms of why this is necessary, Council and US Committee have given clear direction that public engagement is important in the planning process. And so this is fulfilling that. This is allowing 2 opportunities for the members of the public to consult with you right up until the point where you make a decision. In terms of, and I think I get what Councillor House is speaking to, in the way that it used to be where we came to planning 1 month, and then we came to planning the next month, and then we came to planning, and then that decision was ratified by council. I think I'm going to defer to Dan to outline all the work that goes into that timeline and why it's not feasible to go back to that.
Sure, thank you. First, I'll echo the comments about the planning, the public process. As professional planners, we are obligated to facilitate a public process and understand what the public interest is. So that's part of our role that should form as part of our recommendation. In terms of the planning application and timeline, so I'll try to explain it simply and try to fill in the gaps in terms of how legislative timelines work with us or against us. When we have an application submitted to us, we have 30 days to deem that application complete. Now, what that means for staff is that we circulate that application and all the contents that have been provided to us, described at a pre-consultation meeting perhaps. We have 30 days to review that, or to circulate it, review it, and it's not just planning staff, it's engineering, building, the GRCA, sometimes the MTO, any technical departments, internal, external, that would be required to provide comment or to satisfy. They would provide comments, we compile those comments, and we determine whether or not planning staff are ready to make a recommendation. Can we move that forward? So that's all happening within 30 days. It's already a very tight timeline. We do operate under a 3-week circulation, and so already that's a very tight timeline to deem it complete. Once it's deemed complete, we are now ready to move it into the public realm towards a planning committee for information. What that requires is, I'll backtrack. Once it's deemed complete, that timeline starts ticking. Another timeline starts ticking. In the case of a zoning bylaw amendment application, 90 days to make a decision. So what that means is we've deemed it complete. We can't just put it on the next available agenda necessarily based on the timing of when we've deemed it complete, because we have 20 days requirement to circulate public notices. So, you know, that's where the timelines start to get really tricky. So an application received at the beginning of the month of January doesn't necessarily mean it's going to February for information. It may mean it's going to March because of the timelines of having to meet other statutory requirements of public notices. In that time, so now we've made it from a January submission to a March information meeting, and we've presented it for information. We've received all the feedback. Now we have a staff recommendation to present to committee that involves writing the report with the recommendation and all the justification, and another circulation requirement. So there is a bit of work to pick up on a comment today. an application presented for information, and then the request to send it to Agricultural Committee. That's another step, another meeting cycle that kind of doesn't necessarily fit really well within trying to make a decision within 90 days. In the case of a plan of subdivision, we have a little bit more time, 120 days, but we can appreciate that the technical review does take more time as the scope of the development is much more complex. So, the extra, we don't have a lot of time to work with, not a lot of wiggle room. So I think that's where the recommendation comes into play.
We have some other questions. Councillor Coleman. Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dan or to Alicia. We changed this process, I think, about a year ago. How many times have we failed?
To date, I don't believe we've had to return any fees for the purpose of missing the timelines, and I don't believe we've had any appeals on a non-decision.
So, just a comment, and it kind of, I'm still curious then as to why we would want to change something that appears to be effective.
Through the chair to Councillor Bell, it was at the direction of committee that we revisit the process, and so that's what we're doing. And I think just to kind of further along what Dan has said, depending on when those applications are deemed complete, we might be able to make the next cycle, but we also might not. And so we're essentially playing roulette in terms of whether or not we can make timelines if we were to say go back and add that extra 2 weeks back on. And there has actually been times where an applicant heard the decision of planning and then on the day of council filed an OLT appeal for non-decision. So it does happen, and it has happened.
But if I understand, it hasn't happened in the last year since we changed the process.
Correct. Since we've taken the 2 weeks off at the end and we've gone to a 2 meeting instead of a 3 meeting, it has not happened to my understanding.
So it's not the time for comment.
Okay. Councillor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dan. When you spoke of the 30 days to deem it complete, and then you said, potentially it has to go to, maybe GRCA or MTO or something like that. As we all well know, sometimes they don't move at a very high rate of speed, so to speak. Is there any, does the clock stop if we're waiting for GRCA or MTO? How I'm trying to understand how we can, in essence, be penalized if they, let's say MTO takes 30 days on their own. How, is there no compensation for these, I'll call them third-party people that have to review this?
Yep. Through Mr. Chair, I think we have, the county, we have a great relationship with all of our external commenting agencies, and we communicate very well with what our timelines are. When I talk about a 3-week commenting circulation, most times that can be accommodated by the GRCA or the MTO, for example. If there's a case where we don't necessarily have their comments, then the application may be deemed incomplete for other unrelated reasons, or perhaps the application moves forward with a recommendation, is deemed complete, but it moves forward with a recommendation for refusal because we don't have enough information to be able to support the application. So we may have to get creative in how an application or a recommendation moves forward. But I think the important thing is that we do have the information, and it might not be that the information provided is missing pieces, but it may be that perhaps the GRCA comments aren't the piece that's keeping us from making a recommendation, but it does still allow for opportunities for those comments to come in later in the stages. But now that clock is ticking, and we're running the risk of the GRCA's comments throwing it off the rails if there's something there that takes more time to be addressed.
Follow up if I could. So at some point in time, if we're waiting for an MTO or waiting for a GRCA, as planning, you go, okay, you know what? It doesn't really hold much weight in this application. We're gonna, complete it or whatever. You have to make that decision as you go. and that doesn't take more staff time?
Through Mr. Chair, that's correct. Sometimes we do have to move forward so that we can, again, deem it complete within the 30 days, deem it complete or incomplete. So if we deemed it incomplete, we would have good, strong reason why it's deemed complete. We share that with the applicant. They resubmit, and we have another 30 days to deem it complete. So that does happen more often than not, where it's been deemed incomplete because something's actually missing, or there's a component to something that's been missing, and we deem it incomplete with good justification, and we send it back to the applicants to have for a resubmission, where we get another 30 days to again receive it, circulate it, deem it incomplete or complete.
Okay, but we've done our part as making the decision one way or another. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just speaking to the proposed recommendation, I do support it. I think it's making a process that seems to work. At least it's been working in the last year, as Councilor Bell has suggested, but it tends to make it better. It makes it more efficient and will be easier to understand and more efficient. The one thing that concerns me, and it's something that I don't quite understand, and maybe you can elaborate on this. The Planning Act identifies the role of the Planning Advisory Committee, the Planning Committee. The Municipal Act identifies and outlines the role of the Council. But I don't think either one makes mention of a Planning Council. What is a Planning Council? Is it a Planning Committee that's a council, or a council that's a planning committee? Or is it anything that, other than a council meeting, that is doing what the Planning Advisory Committee? So that's a term that has to be clarified.
Yeah. So through Chair McAlpine to Councillor Chambers' question. So the Planning Council is something that I'm referring to. It's a specific clause within the procedural bylaw which outlines restrictions surrounding the council that meets on the second Tuesday of the month, which differentiates it from the Tuesday on the month, the final Tuesday on the month. So currently, the procedural bylaw states that restrictions in terms of business can only be heard Planning Act related items, so applications and items, so it's restricted. So Planning Council is the term coined by clerks, I guess, referencing the second council of the month, which business is solely planning. So you'll see later on tonight there for the actual council meeting, there's in the agenda recommendation for the agenda, there's a procedural bylaw exemption recommendation, because the intent of tonight's council meeting is strictly planning related. So in terms of Municipal Act or Planning Act, there's no Planning Council term. It would be a County of Brant term to differentiate the business heard between the two council meetings.
Respectfully, the County of Brant can't make up a body. It either has to be council or it has to be a planning committee, because there's no jurisdiction for a planning council, because it's something that we can't invent in Brant County. Because when we sit as a body, a decision-making body, we can't make up what we are.
So through Councillor McAlpine to Councillor Chambers' question. So yes, you're correct. We're not creating a new body. It's just a term that I'm using to explain the business that will be heard at council on the second Tuesday of the month as opposed to the fourth. So if you were to look at the procedural bylaw, it doesn't create something called the Planning Council. It provides restrictions for the council that's being heard on the second Tuesday of the month. I'm using it as a term here to differentiate between the two, but in terms of formally creating a new, that's not what we're recommending. I'm just using it in this current context, to differentiate between the two.
So just to be clear, then the agenda for that meeting would be the County of Brant Council.
That would be correct for the second Tuesday of the month as opposed to the fourth.
So I would move the recommendation with the amendment that the word planning be taken out of the recommendation, so it reads, be amended to allow council to hold public meetings.
Okay, I was going to say, okay, Councillor Miller.
Okay, follow up on Councillor Chambers' concerns. So just to be clear, a couple questions of clarification then through you to Alicia. So if it's a council meeting, then decisions made here would require 2/3 majority to overturn, correct?
That would be correct, but that's the same as right now. So planning decisions are currently being made at the council level now. So there'll be no change. It's just the way in which you can consult before making that decision that's changing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Not at planning, but at the council meeting after this. So then my question is, on page 2 of 3, like the last paragraph, you talk about report directly to the Administration Operations Committee. What would be reported to that committee? That I don't understand. Would it be the information parts?
So through Councillor McAlpine to Councillor Miller. So in terms of reports, so currently there are some reports which are policy related. There are not many staff reports which come to this meeting just because of the nature of what this meeting is. For the most part, this meeting, the purpose of the Planning and Development Committee is to hear Planning Act related public meeting. So there really wouldn't be that much. However, if there are any staff reports, so say perhaps policy planning is bringing something on an update to legislation, like just as a staff report, as opposed to it coming to this meeting, it would go to administration and operations or policy, depending on what's the best fit, which is consistent with the rest of the corporation, right? If it's policy related, it goes to policy. If it's administration, potentially, if it's administration related, then it would go there.
Okay, so listening to you then, it sounds like we would only deal with applications, and then anything else would go to either policy or AOC. Is that correct?
So my intention is to remove some of the restrictive language. So right now, the language in the procedural bylaws says Planning Act application related decisions, which means that there's some planning type decisions which try to get on but can't because they're restricted. I'm thinking to restrict that or remove those restrictions a bit. I'm not sure of the wording, but the intent would be planning related items. So say towers would also come. Yes.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just reading from page 2. It says, amending the standing committee structure to remove the Planning and Development Committee from the monthly schedule will free up capacity and streamline the process. Capacity from the clerk's department? Is that why we free up capacity?
Yes. So from that perspective, yes. Doing the 2 meetings in one night, in terms of overall staff capacity, you see there's 2 of us here every Tuesday because it's just not possible for one person to do the prep for planning and to do the prep, the separate prep. So there's that. But also there's been confusion for members of the public as to which meeting information, if it's coming to planning or if it's coming to council. There's some confusion amongst the planners as to where it goes. So this would streamline that in terms of it comes to one meeting the second Tuesday of the month. Council will consider planning related issues.
Yeah. Just if I may, just one small point, Mr. Chair. So if the meeting becomes a council meeting, I presume then the mayor is the chair of that meeting.
That would be correct. Yes. Right now, unless the mayor were to appoint somebody else to chair that meeting, yes, the mayor is the chair of council.
Good luck.
Okay. Councillor Chambers.
And through you, there's just one other technical matter that I think needs to be addressed or explained. and that's the requirement in the Planning Act that member of the public, or there has to be public input on planning decisions. We do that through the Planning Advisory Committee now, who report to whatever is that taken care of? Are we running afoul of the Planning Act with regard to citizen appointees to the Planning Committee?
Sorry, are you referring to planning advisory, what sits within ag currently?
There's some obscure little thing that I'm not going to say circumvent, but we use the Planning Advisory Committee to have public involvement in the planning process as public representation on planning committees. So if we do away with the Planning Advisory Committee, are we running afoul of the requirement for citizen participation in planning?
So through Councillor McAlpine, Chair McAlpine, to Councillor Chambers' question. So the Agriculture Advisory Committee will continue to act as the Planning Advisory Committee. The question at hand would be where it reports to. So currently it reports here. We'd be consulting with the county solicitor since that wouldn't be part of the procedural bylaw amendment. So that can be sorted out later. If the county solicitor feels that it really needs to come here to the I'm not going to call it planning council, second council of the month, or second week of the month council, then we could just have it report directly there if that's legitimate, if that's a concern. In terms of, I'm not sure how much of a concern it is because it's really semantics. Whether you're sitting as A&O or whether you're sitting as planning committee, it's all the same composition. So it's just whether or not having it report to A&O is okay, or whether or not they feel, since it's supposed to be reporting on planning related matters, it should report direct to the council that meets on the second Tuesday of every month.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and not a question, it's a comment. I support it. The most important thing to me is it allows, whether it's planning council or council, to hold public meetings so the public can speak.
Okay. Councillor Chambers.
Are you ready for the recommendation to be put before us?
Okay. Councillor Oakley, do you have any comments? And then Councillor Kyle.
No, I do not.
Okay. Councillor Kyle? Okay. Then you can put your recommendation for.
I will move the recommendation with the word planning deleted.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Second by Councillor Coleman. Oh.
And just a comment, I could be wrong on this, but I believe this is how Norfolk County deals with it.
Okay. So we have a recommendation. We've had it moved and seconded. All those in favor? Okay. Anybody opposed? Okay. The motion and recommendation is passed.
Thank you.
So we have no communication. Okay. Other business? Do we have any other business for tonight? Okay. Nothing in camera. And next meeting will be July the 12th. And we call this meeting adjourned. Congratulations on the first meeting.